Good evening and welcome to the Boone History Center. It's a lovely 20 degrees in Boone today, which is a significant improvement from the last few days. We'd like to welcome our first speaker of the year, actually, for the Boone County Democrats, John Norwood, who is seeking Secretary of Agriculture position. John describes himself as a lifelong Tip O'Neill Democrat. You'll remember Tip O'Neill said all politics is local, and John believes that that applies to agriculture as well. For his education, he has a bachelor's degree from Williams College, an MBA, master's from the Yale Forestry School, which I'm not familiar with, but sounds cool. He has an extensive career in ag from a variety of viewpoints that I'll let him tell you about. Really interesting history here. He served most recently on the Soil and Water Commission for Polk County. He's a small business owner. He's worked in farm-based renewable energy, specialty feeds, Iowa-grown foods, and he and his family have resided in West Des Moines for the past 20 years. His son is a graduate of Luther College, and he has a daughter who's a freshman at Villanova. And welcome, John Norwood.
Good evening, and Penny, thank you for that great introduction. It's exciting to be here today and to be before all you and speaking in front of this group. And I'm running for Secretary of Agriculture. I'm running for the position because I feel as though we need a new vision for our agricultural system here. And just a couple of statistics that I think undergird sort of this tremendous heritage and productivity of this system. If Iowa were its own country, we would be in the top 10 agricultural producers in the world. And we're only number 2 behind the state of California in terms of our overall agricultural productivity. So Iowa punches way above its weight, a population of 3.1 million people. It's tremendously productive. We're the number 1 producer of corn and beans. We produce a third of the nation's hog. We're a leader in egg production, and so on and so forth. What is wrong with that picture? Well, nothing by itself, but it's a system that's out of balance. And by out of balance, I mean, when you look at our soils, our soil loss, we send 10 times the amount of soil down our streams and rivers that Mother Nature produces each year. That's not sustainable. If we think it on a corn basis, for every pound of corn we produce, we lose 2 pounds of soil. Our water quality is impacted because of the system. 1 billion pounds of nitrates on an average year find its way down the Mississippi. And then you look at our almost 70 of our 99 counties are in population decline. So I would argue these are symptoms of a system that's out of balance. Okay, so John, what do we do about this? This system is unbalanced. Well, there are 3 things that I ran on as a soil and water commissioner in 2017 that sort of bubbled up in my conversations with people. And they're relevant today. In fact, we're beginning to learn how to scale some of the ideas that I brought to the table from a systematic perspective. The idea, we farm 23 million acres of corn and beans in this state. That's a very, very large system. So we have to be very systematic, I think, in terms of how we approach this. So there's 3 general areas. I'll talk briefly about those, and then if there are any questions, I would love to take questions, because that's where you learn that exchange. The first area we have to focus on is what I call the ag plumbing, the ag infrastructure. Of the 23 million acres, 14 is tiled. Some people say, what is tiling? Tiling is the underground plumbing in a farm field that helps drain the soil and make it productive. Okay, so 14 million is tiled, John. What else? Well, 7 million of those 14 million acres are controlled by something called a drainage district. A drainage district is simply a system. It's a system of property owners that work together to help drain the lands to make it productive. So we need to have a new vision, I think, that when these systems were defined over 100 years ago, the primary function was to drain the soil. And now what we need to do is essentially look at thinking about these systems as water management districts that have the full capability of filtering water, recharging aquifers, some flood storage, maybe even some irrigation in places with our changing climate. So ag infrastructure is the first piece of the three-legged stool. The second piece of the stool is soil health. Soil health is incredibly important, but not well understood. The idea of soil health is basically soil is a living matrix. It has biology in it, and our systematic practices of the way we farm for the past 70, 80 years have degraded the soil. It's almost like having a car and you don't have enough oil in the engine. What happens? The car runs out, eventually the engine seizes. And so soil health is tremendously important, and we need to begin to look at systematic ways to improve the soil health. And part of the factor is the fact that 60% of landowners in Iowa are absentee. I talk about Martha. Martha's 94. She lives in Florida. She has 1,000 acres up here in Pocahontas County, or maybe it's Boone County today. And she really doesn't know much about soil health. And so maybe nobody's told her about it. Maybe the operator that rents the land hasn't told her about it. So we got to figure out a way to look at soil health from a team perspective where we can help people like Martha improve the soil health, working with her operators and new operators and others that are key to this process. And then the third thing we need to do is work on diversification of what we grow, raise, and produce. We have the 23 million acres I mentioned. There's about 2.5 of the 23 million acres that we're growing corn and beans because we subsidize that through our federal policies, in particular crop insurance, where we should not be growing the corn and beans. It's down in the 2-year floodplain. It's highly erodible soil. And so we need to begin to rebalance. I spoke about an unbalanced system. We need to restore the balance by diversifying what we grow and where we grow it. We may have CRP in some of these acres. We may have flood control easements in certain acres, wood, forestry related aspects to that 2.5 million. And we need to think across scale. Our system is set up to scale bigger and bigger, which means we have more productivity, which means produce more with less. And we're seeing that in our rural communities. We're seeing fewer and fewer opportunities because the productivity of the system is driving the scale, which is driving out all of the other jobs and opportunities. And so by diversifying the system to some of these other land uses and thinking about the 80 million people that are within a day's drive here of Iowa, we have a system that's set up to feed the world, including China. And China's got lots of good people, but I'm not so sure we want to have a system that is singularly focused on providing low-cost food, feed, and fuel for the rest of the world when we have a system that's so imbalanced. So I'm not saying that we want to turn our back on the commodity system. It's a huge part. It's the foundation of what we do, but we need to begin to diversify. And diversification also includes other groups of people. I was at a Practical Farmers of Iowa annual conference today, and I was in a session towards the end of the day on Black farmers. And so historically, we've had a system through our USDA and other aspects of our agricultural system that's really not been inclusive. That was part of the message today. That's going to add some diversity, not only what we grow, but allowing some of the other groups in Iowa that are part of our future to be part of this beautiful system. So that's a little bit about me and my vision, and I hope you will support me in my candidacy.
Okay, thanks, John. That was really enlightening. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did too. And I'm going to be in touch with you for some follow-up on that. You can check his website, Facebook page, send him comments and questions. He'd be happy to hear from you. Next up, running for U.S. Senate to replace Chuck Grassley, Admiral Michael Franken. Mike's a retired 3-star vice admiral, and his final posting was Deputy Director of Military Ops for U.S. South Africa Command. So this guy is used to running a large operation and running it smoothly. He was born and raised in Northwest Iowa, rural Sioux County, right, Mike?
Yep.
Okay, youngest of 9, so he learned to fight for everything he got, I'm guessing. And he knows,
Mostly against women because I had 6 sisters.
and he knows about hand-me-downs. His father was a machinist and a blacksmith. His mom was a teacher, and he's married to Jordan since 1989, 2 kids, and he lives in Sioux City, Iowa currently. And we'll let him tell you all about his campaign. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you very much. Hello, Boone County. Pleased to be here. It's been a year since I've driven through, and I want to say that the city is as delightful as ever, and very pleased to be here. So, my name is Michael Franken. Indeed, Sioux County, Iowa was my home. I am most likely, like you, rather disgusted at the way things are going in the political realm in America today. And I think that with the senior spokespersons, statesman from the state of Iowa, Chuck Grassley, would be a leveling hand, a calming influence on that which troubles the political spectrum in America. We don't see that from our aged senator at all. Rather, we see someone who is part of the problem. And I think the biggest issue today is that we're missing out on lots of opportunities. And as I look at Senator Grassley, someone who's been in elected office for 40 years, across the great scape of Iowa, how much is named after Chuck Grassley? Any bills, any measures, any buildings, any post offices, any roads, anything? How could that be? I mean, I've only lived in Africa for a couple of years, and I've got roads named after me, for crying out loud, and it's not like I tried. I mean, you've got to be a person of verve and movement and do something and get going. And I fear that neither one of our senators are doing what needs to be done, this opportunity for this great state. So, Sioux County, indeed, raised in a machine shop. My dad, one-person machine shop. He came back from World War II, a wounded vet, much like my grandfather in World War I, wounded vet. All my ancestors were homesteaders in Northwest Iowa, farmers. And fortunately, they're in Lebanon, Iowa, family of 11 people. My mom was the academic, the smart one, the music, the math, the reading, the school teacher. My dad was the tough one, working in a machine shop all day long, fixing implements, fixing trucks, welding, etc. That's my life. Ultimately, they taught us how to grow up and grow out and expand ourselves. And all of us kids did that. It's a success story. It's what we're kind of looking for in America. Similarly, like my dad, I worked in a slaughterhouse, worked on farms because the farmers paid me. My dad didn't. A number of other jobs, construction, welding, worked for a law firm because I was good at math, as an engineer. And ultimately, I on a whim, took a scholarship test, got a scholarship, and set off in the United States Navy on a completely different path of life. Everything was going swimmingly, but all good things must come to an end. When in 2016 election happened, I voted with my feet. I submitted a request to resign. Having worked for every president since Jimmy Carter, I chose not to work for Donald Trump. Military service was highly honorable. I want to thank the United States for this opportunity. I got to go to graduate schools multiple times, worked for a U.S. senator on a personal staff, was a ship captain at the age of 40, was a commodore of many, many ships and submarines, ultimately land forces commander in a combat operation, many, many years in combat theaters these days, and a host of policy and strategy jobs. Had the privilege of starting an 800-person defense agency, bipartisan, working in multiple states and multiple countries, including with union workers on my staff. Ultimately, I was also President Obama's chief of legislative affairs during a time of sequestration, bringing authorization and appropriations bills through the finish line in a time of intense sequestration. Lots of lots of cross-party time, lots of broad time in Washington, D.C., and stretching across the globe. Having moved 20 times, 4 continents, 2 kids, single woman, same wife the whole time, we've lived a full, rich life. I'm a father of an adopted child, a foster out of the foster care system, and have gone through all those throes as a parent across the globe. It's a wonderful life. But as I said, all good things must come to an end. I'm quite disgusted today that we are in the state of Iowa, the state that we're in. We have a fabulous opportunity, much like we're talking about agriculture here before. Our agricultural development in this state can see new horizons. I'm an engineer by training, physicist, and I see a fabulous future for the state of Iowa, especially in our electrical grid, where we can expand it many-fold to bring in EVs and be the most prosperous place in the nation to bring in high-energy businesses. Also, transportation from a logistics perspective. This production of finished goods and information technologies here in the state of Iowa, using in a carbon tax environment, the cheapest electrical power in the nation, with transmodal opportunities in Davenport and Dubuque and Cedar Rapids and Sioux City, rail line, river traffic, roadways, airports, fabulous opportunities for the state of Iowa. And we sit rather dormant on those. We need to move, move, move. This race for the U.S. Senate is infinitely winnable. Infinitely winnable. The numbers are in our favor. We need to, as Democrats, speak clearly, stay on message, recruit the independents to join our movement, because they will hold sway in the general election. And regarding our candidates for the general election, it's imperative that we win. As we narrow down into the primary, make sure we choose the person who can go against Chuck Grassley and win this race. This was an issue that we've had in past races that we don't have. We have nobody with their thumb on the scale other than Iowans this time around. We choose our own candidate, and this seat we can win. I want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's Franken for Iowa is my website. This is infinitely winnable. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity, and please do send me a note if you would like questions, or if there's anything I can do and where I should show up. Let me say that throughout the state of Iowa, we are establishing county commanders who are touchstones in each county to give us an update and a heads up on what's happening and ensure that our message gets out. But I think you will see that our ground game will be above par, and we can confront with the Republicans and have a discussion with what's best for the future of Iowa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Franken. I'm excited about his candidacy, and I hope you all are as well. Next, we are going to hear from Ryan O'Leary. And Ryan is running for U.S. Congress opposing Randy Feenstra. Many of us in this area are familiar with Feenstra. Ryan's a native of Carroll, Iowa, where he learned values, common sense, and a drive to push forward. He spent 11 years as an infantryman in the Iowa National Guard, toured in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then followed by 4 years advising Kurdish forces. When he's not deployed, he's worked as in the plumbing and electrical and HVAC fields for rural communities and for ag operations. He now owns a pressure wash and maintenance business specializing in hog confinement, and he has a weapons research company working on a modular hand grenade, which I thought was really interesting. So let's hear from Ryan O'Leary.
First off, thank you for letting me be here today. Thank you for the introduction, Penny. So my name is Ryan O'Leary. Like she said, I'm a Carroll native. I'm running in the 4th District against Randy Feenstra as a Democrat. I've been to 12 different counties now, and I've spoken quite a bit with the locals. Not very good at speaking, still working on that. But I'm running my campaign on truth, transparency, and honesty. So we're going to start with the bad and the ugly first. Up till 2016, I've been a registered Republican. I always voted as a Republican, no matter who the candidate was, including Donald Trump. I voted for him in 2016. In 2016, I met J.D. Scholten, who was running in the 4th District against Steve King at the time. I was back on leave from Iraq, and I basically ran into him through, like, on a whim. I went to a Democrat speech that he was holding at DMAC. I ended up sitting down with him, and I ended up being a cross-party voter for the first time in 2016. Ever since then, I've been a cross-party voter. I originally started this campaign as independent, and the reason being is that I still am very upset with how our parties have ran for the middle-class American. Since the 1970s, we've had 50 years of corporate interests that have run amok in our agricultural industry, our tech industry, throughout all of our industries, and it's upsetting to see. Every time I'd come back from Iraq, Afghanistan, or anywhere in the world, there'd be closed storefronts in our rural communities, people without jobs, homes in disrepair, and at the same time, we're seeing corporate bailouts happen in 2008. 2021, there was $140 billion given out to the banking industry in bonuses to their executives. While in 2021, Americans were unable to work, Iowans were out of jobs as well, and we faced an epidemic that we are still facing today. And the reason I'm running is because I want to change that. We need to push back on corporate interests in our ag, tech industries, in all of our industries. And we need to get back to the earlier ages of where the middle class actually has a voice. No more special interests, no more lobbying firm interest money. We need campaign finance reforms. We need to prevent future foreign ownership of our agricultural industries and any other critical industries. That means we need to push back against companies like JBS and Smithfield from acquiring American farmland. We need to push back against the Singaporean companies that are taking over our ports. And this isn't going to be a quick process. This isn't a 1 or 2 year thing. We need to one foot in front of the other. We need legislation that isn't Hail Marys, but 10 yards at a time. And that is why I'm running. And again, I did vote for Trump. I'm not a Republican anymore. I am a registered Democrat. I do think the Democrats can move us forward, but we need to get rid of some of this tribalization that's happening in our political system currently. And we can do that, but we need the younger generation to step up and come, be active in the political parties, whether it's local, state, or federal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan, and welcome to the welcome you into the Good Guys team.
Thanks.
Okay, next we're going to have a short video, just a few minutes, from Eric Van Lanker, and we're going to finish out today by speaking remotely with Abby Finkenau. So, a little bit about Eric. Eric is running for Secretary of State. He's been elected 4 times Clinton County Auditor, so he spent 12 years in that position, and he's also been an Chief Elections Officer. So this man has experience, a lot of experience with elections. He knows them up one side and down the other. He's been president of the Iowa State Association of Auditors, several years state election admin for training curriculum chair for election training that they have. He's been administering that. He's a native of Cedar Rapids, went to UNI and graduated with a communications degree. He was a journalist for more than 10 years. He's married to Tanya for 28 years and living in Clinton with 2 grown children. There's a lot of that going around today. Our tech person, Diana, will kick off the video, and then we'll talk to Abby right after that.
and I believe we need a voter advocate running elections in the state. I'm in my 4th term as Clinton County Auditor and Commissioner of Elections. And what that means is I know exactly what election day is like on the front lines. I've run dozens of elections and learned to have complete and total respect for the excellent job our county auditors and their dedicated nonpartisan staff do, and an undying gratitude for every everybody who works at our polling locations and does the painstaking work of opening and counting our absentee ballots. And to anyone watching who have worked the polls or counted those absentee ballots, thank you and God bless you. You know, the elections process we have in Iowa, it's fair, it's neutral, it's nonpartisan, it's professional, efficient, and even friendly. And that means the world to me. There's nothing more important. It's almost a sacred commitment the way I think about protecting elections. You know, the best part of my job has been helping my Iowa neighbors vote and trust in that outcome. And that's what I mean when I say voter advocate. We need a Secretary of State with the experience and judgment to right the ship and get back to the business of running elections the way Iowans always have. But today, not every Iowan sees voting as a sacred right to be protected. In fact, our state is home to some of the most cynical, short-sighted partisan attempts to manipulate turnout anywhere in America. They know they can't say there's fraud, so they change the voting rules and then work the refs, hoping Iowans will lose faith in the system that we cherish. Their approach is deeply wrong, and together, you and I are going to fix it. Look, I've been there. I fought the battles at the State House for more than 12 years, supporting good election laws, fighting off the bad, and shaking my head at the ugly, just like you. So here's 3 things that we're going to do together. Let's work to protect fair access to a ballot and maintain confidence in our excellent Iowa voting system. Then let's restore early voting. You know, absentee voting works best for our voters and our administrators when they have at least 29 days to vote. It's even better when it was 40 days, and I'm not giving up on that. And satellite voting opportunities should be decided by locally elected officials who know their voters best. Let's give them back that decision-making ability. And finally, count all the votes. Halting the counting of absentee ballots when polls close is totally irresponsible when we have reliable barcode tech and the voters sent in their ballot in good faith. Yeah, those are going to be long haul fights, but I'm in it if you are with me. Oh, and one more thing. I've won 4 elections in a river county that's flipped to red. I know how to work hard, and I'll be working hard to earn your vote for the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State in 2022. Look for me on Facebook at Vote Van Lanker and on Twitter at AuditorVL. I hope we can meet in person soon. Thank you, Boone County, for your time and consideration.
Do we have Abby's? We are having a technical, well, our tech is working fine, but we haven't.
They haven't logged in.
Yeah, they have, Abby and her team have not logged into our link. We'll give it a minute. And in the meantime, while I have you all captive audience, I would like to talk about caucuses coming up. February 7th, we're going to hold in-person caucuses, masks required, we'll social distance as much as we can, and we would appreciate as much attendance as we can get. You do not have to be present if you want to run for central committee, a spot on our central committee, or if you want to be a representative at the county convention. Okay. All right. Let me introduce Abby. We have her now. Abby Finkenauer would like to be your U.S. Senator from Iowa. Abby Finkenauer is a name that most of you are probably familiar with. She was U.S. Rep for Iowa's 1st District from 2019 to 21. Before that, Iowa's House of Representatives and a graduate of Drake University. She was the second youngest woman ever elected to the U.S. House. And along with Cindy Axne, they were the first 2 women from Iowa ever elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. So thanks for standing up for women. And we'll take it away. Abby Finkenauer.
Well, hello there, and I apologize in advance for any background noise. I am still in the car. I was so close, almost back to Cedar Rapids to hop on from home, but here we are. We're out there talking to Iowans all across the state today. Actually, we were just in Carroll County and then stopped in Marshalltown, and Marshalltown turned into a bigger event than we originally anticipated. So good sign, lots of energy on the ground today. So we're excited about that and could not be more excited to chat with you, Boone County, and just thank you so much for all that you do. And I am fired up for 2022. And I gotta say, I am very proud to say I am Abby Finkenauer and I am running for United States Senate because 47 years in Washington, D.C. is too damn long for anybody. And beyond that, look, I mean, we know that there is work to be done. And I will say this, after those 2 years that I spent in Congress, I can say that I think there are way too many people sitting in Washington who read about working families or get briefs on, oh my gosh, what really matters to their constituents, but haven't actually lived it lately. And somebody like me, again, that comes from a working class family in Iowa, I mean, I grew up in a town with more cows than people. My dad was a union pipe fitter and mom worked for the school district. Nobody like me had actually ever been elected to the U.S. House before. Actually, there had never been a United Association family member ever elected to the House. And for me, I think about that and I just know that we have to do so much more work making sure that our representative democracy is more representative of our people and that we have people, especially after this last week, you guys were watching with the Senate, you got Sinema, you've got Manchin, who couldn't even get voting rights done and refused to actually move that forward with filibuster reform. And I just thought to myself, look, somebody like Kyrsten Sinema in particular, she's forgotten where she's come from. She's forgotten about what truly matters. And you've got my word that not only will I never forget where I come from and who I fight for, but I'm going to fight like heck every single day I have to be able to do this and get this done for Iowa and for our country. You see, when you grow up the way that I did as a 6-year-old that would go to bed at night with these old white t-shirts, these were our pajamas. We didn't have fancy pajamas. We just had the old t-shirts that dad would wear under his Carhartts. And they had tiny little holes all over them. And they were actually from the sparks of his welding torch. And I can tell you this, that is something you don't forget. At the age of 10, I had to have dad's business agent's name memorized because when that name showed up on caller ID, it meant my dad had a job. And I remember those months and those years where that name was not showing up very often and what that meant for my family. Again, that is something you don't forget. At the age of 16, went to visit him one summer while he was working down in St. Louis, and we'd stay in a travel trailer when we did. And he came home one day and he was just soaking wet from top to bottom. I think he'd worked about 12 hours that day, and he takes his belt and he starts wringing it out in the sink. And I looked at him like, what'd you do, Dad? Jump in a pool? Because he, again, just soaking top to bottom. And he looks at me and he just says, no, Abby, that's sweat. And again, that is something you don't forget. It is why I have spent my entire life fighting for working families like the one I grew up in, like the folks on this call and folks across this state and across this country, because quite frankly, you haven't been heard loud enough yet in Washington or in that state capitol. At the age of 24, I got tired of seeing people say one thing and go do another in that state capitol. And I also got tired of the fact that I saw friends of mine start to move away. And they, again, were leaving because they couldn't find the right opportunities. They were trying to figure out how they were going to balance everything, but they wanted to stay and they were struggling to do it. So I ran for office at 24. We were able to win that seat and got sworn in at the age of 26. And there I was for 4 years in that state house fighting tooth and nail, whether it was against their attacks on women, whether it was attacks on education, collective bargaining rights, workers' comp, you name it. And it was actually in 2017, after 2016, you remember, after Trump won the state, folks thought, oh gosh, Democrats can't win in Iowa. How are they going to win? Well, they didn't know me, and they didn't know that I was going to fight tooth and nail, because I was standing on that state house floor when they gutted collective bargaining rights. And I proudly voted no against it. But I looked up into that gallery and I saw the faces of teachers, of electricians, of folks who, corrections officers, people who are just busting their tails every day for their family and just expect to be treated with dignity and respect in their government. And they saw that promise be broken. And I thought to myself, this is not how we treat people in my state or in my country. And I was going to do whatever the heck I could to get it back. And so at the age of 28, I decided to run for the U.S. House of Representatives to actually flip a seat and take back the majority in the U.S. House. And actually, I remember, at 28, I was paying off student loans. I had no money of my own to put into it. And people thought, how in the world is this young woman going to take on a millionaire who had just gotten reelected? He wrote himself $500,000 checks for his campaign. And honestly, I didn't know exactly how it was all going to come together, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew with how I grew up in rural Iowa, in that small town called Sherrill, but represented the city of Dubuque, that I got tired of seeing people try to divide our urban and our rural areas. I got tired of people just trying to keep driving those divisions versus actually bringing us together. And I thought, if we can talk about our values and our shared humanity of who we are as Iowans, of the fact that we are people who step up for our neighbors. If somebody needs a hand, we are there for each other. That's what it's about. And if we can talk about that, we can bring people together and we can win, and we can get out there and we can have tough conversations face to face. And that is what we did. We took a seat that had been lost by 8 points in 2016, and we won it by 4 in 18. And then what a couple of years in Congress that was. Nothing like getting sworn in the middle of a government shutdown, but that didn't stop me from getting to work. Honestly, the first 2 weeks I was there, I was the youngest woman to ever pass a bill. We passed a bill actually having to do with creating more opportunities in rural Iowa. And it was a bipartisan one that I worked on with a gentleman from Utah, because again, that's how I thought it was supposed to work. Introduced over 27 bipartisan bills, tried to just get things done, voted for a wage increase for every American, for lower prescription drug prices for every American, for affordable, accessible, and quality childcare, because all three matter, and for the best investment in rural infrastructure that the country had ever seen up until that point. And honestly, a big reason I'm running for the U.S. Senate is because we did all of this stuff, and yet we just kept running into roadblocks. And those roadblocks were people like Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst, who should have known better, but were so obsessed to holding on to power that they just refused anything that moved our country forward or moved working families forward. And when January 6th happened, I'll tell you folks, that changed a lot for me. I was really frustrated and honestly just very upset and angry about watching my friends be attacked that day and by a violent mob that had been fed misinformation and lies for months. And I just thought to myself, again, we've got to figure this out as Democrats, as Americans. How do we fight back against this misinformation? How do we make sure that people know the truth and that we can bring our country together again? Because we've got to figure it out. And I was hoping we would see that from Senator Grassley, but we all know what happened, right? He didn't just not only didn't call out what happened that day, he didn't want to investigate it. He actually even pushed the conspiracies about the election himself. And then he stood on stage with Donald Trump, accepting that endorsement and really selling out himself and selling out our democracy. And somebody like that does not deserve to be reelected, not in this state and not in this country. And you've got my word. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we beat this guy. Look, the contrast between the two of us is pretty stark on a number of levels. But it's also the contrast between the policies that we stand for and the things that I have done in those last 2 that I will put up against his last 10 any day of the week. It is about holding him accountable for not just what he's done that has hurt working families in this state. Like, for example, if you've got any type of pre-existing condition, diabetes, you name it, had cancer, whatever it is, this guy tried to vote 12 times to take away your health care, and he'd do it again. We have to make sure Iowans know about this. He talks down to Iowans, acting like they're not saving their money and just spending it on booze, women, and movies. We've heard him say that before. hasn't been held accountable for it yet, but we're doing it now. We have to make sure that folks know that these seats aren't just owed to somebody because of their last name, like Senator Grassley seems to think they are. He's been there for 47 years, talks about term limits, and yet is still there. So not only do I think we should have term limits, I'm term limiting myself. I don't think somebody should spend their life in Washington, D.C. I think 47 years is far too long. If you can't get it done in 12, I don't know what you're there for. And so I think it'll help cut down on the corruption piece and make sure that we actually have representatives that are doing the work. And here's the thing, it is about work. It is about doing the work in this election. You've got my word. This is my home. I'm doing everything I can to be able to get this done. We actually today have organizers all over the state. We're working with statewide campaigns and congressional campaigns to get folks on the ballot because it is important. It is not just about us. It is about you. It is about making sure that you have access to healthcare where you don't need a GoFundMe page if, God forbid, you get sick. It's about making sure that you have somebody that's going to tackle climate change and create good paying jobs as we do it. It's about making sure that for you to make sure that our young Iowans who have moved away can come back home. And it's about our young Iowans, by the way, who can't even vote yet. It is about their future. It is about our country. And we have got to do everything we can to try to save this democracy, do our job right, and make sure, again, that we bring some common sense to Iowa and to that U.S. Senate and actually have people who understand families like the one that I grew up in, that you did as well. So I will keep working hard here every single day. But with us, we can't take anything for granted. So if you can go to abbyfinkenauer.com, we'd love to have your support. Whether it's calling, whether it's, door knocking, we're going to be out on doors. Absolutely have to. Whether it is, if you're able to donate, that's huge too. By the way, fun fact, when I say we're taking on Senator Grassley, I mean it. We're taking him on in a way that he's never been before. We actually outraised him the first quarter we were in the race, raised over $1 million in 2 months. And we'll continue to do that work because we have to. This is how it comes together, and we just need you with us. I think our most common contribution is $5. So everything matters, and you guys matter, and we're going to get out there. Can't wait to see you in person and just keep doing this right for Iowa and for our country. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Abby. And I'd like to say a big thank you to all of our speakers today. I hope everybody enjoyed hearing from these candidates and it comes away motivated to get in the fight and do some good for the people of Iowa. To finish my thought from earlier, if you would like to be a Central Committee member or a representative to our county convention, you can just contact somebody in the Boone County Democrats, go to the Facebook page, website, however you can get a hold of anybody, and let us know that you want to be in, and you need not be present to win, just to let you know. And we could really use an infusion of enthusiasm. We have wonderful Central Committee members, but we have some empty seats. So step up, come join us, and be part of our team going forward. Thank you all, and good night.